here shooting a video, a little tutorial for Modern Music Studio. I'm one of the drum instructors there. I've been there for about 5 years now, and a little background on me. I hold a degree in jazz drum set and orchestral and world percussion from Cal Arts in California. Lived in that state and also in Colorado, pretty much about half and half. But I've been out in Colorado for the majority of the last like 20 years or so. And yeah, I've been teaching for 18 years, and I'm going to demonstrate some paradiddle concepts today, mostly the concepts that revolve around the Groove-A-Diddle, which is super fun to say. And that's where you're taking a paradiddle, which is, if I just break it down really quick, is going to be so you're leading with your right hand, playing 2 alternate strokes, followed by a double on the lead hand, and then it switches to the non-dominant hand, and you repeat the process, right? So left, right, and then left, left. And from there, it's amazing what you can do, because you can use this for a soloing idea, you can use it for fills, you can use it for what I like to call change-ups, which is where you're playing like a straight-ahead groove without a paradiddle, and then you can kind of inject the paradiddle in there. So for like fusion, funk chops, it's a must-have, it's a must-know. And I'm more or less going to break down the different ways that you can incorporate this into your playing for grooves, specifically for grooves. I'm not really going to get into filling or soloing with it today, but in further videos I might elaborate a little bit more. So I'm going to turn to this camera so you guys can see what's happening. From that angle, it's a lot easier to demonstrate this. And basically, what you want to start with is the paradiddle here, and then I'll demonstrate it one more time, a little bit faster. And then, you know, some people play open-handed, but I've played predominantly with my right hand lead crossed over, like old school style, so that's how I'm going to demonstrate all this today. But you can definitely experiment with changing it up and trying to play open-handed if you want to, which is difficult because it would be left-hand lead on the hat. But you cross over, keep the right hand, lead hand on the hat, left hand on the snare, and just try to play it flat first. And then the next step is to double everything that you're doing with the right hand with your right foot. Now these are just exercises to get you comfortable playing Groove-A-Diddles, and then I'm going to go into more detail of how you can really make them smooth and transition in and out of them. Okay, so these are like the step-by-step approach for building the Groove-A-Diddle. Okay, so you have this. Once you have that, then there's a couple different angles that you can take at it. One would be to straighten out the hi-hat so that the hi-hat is now playing 1/8 notes, and you're only keeping the paradiddle between the kick and the snare. So in a way, this is a shortcut method to understanding how the kick and the snare are now holding down the paradiddle, whereas the hi-hat is playing straight 1/8 notes across the top. Yeah. The difficulty in this is that you'll have some doubles on the kick and some doubles on the snare that correspond with a single hat. Yeah, and so that's kind of, there's some coordination issues that you might have to overcome. So example. Once you get that happening, I recommend trying to play one measure. Actually, we'll do a half measure of just a straight ahead groove, which can really, to start with, just consist of a kick and a snare. So you literally just go 1 and 2 and then on count 3, incorporate the paradiddle. Nice unit with this. 1, 2, So that's a really good one to get you going. One thing that I always like to say that a lot of roads lead to John Bonham, because although he wasn't the first person to do rhythms like this, he really wrote the book on it. You know, he incorporated so much into his drumming with Led Zeppelin that I think he's one of the best guys to check out when it comes to understanding Groove-A-Diddles and what I refer to as change-ups, which is where you're playing again like a more straight ahead groove, and then you're tossing a partial, which is part of a paradiddle, or like a full paradiddle in there. So this could be thought of as a partial in a way, but really it's just a full paradiddle, and you're just going to pick it up on the last note of the paradiddle that would have preceded it. So in this case it would be the and the would be on the snare. So we're going to play the same pattern that we just played, but we're going to do like a pickup note, if you will, on the of 2 preceding count 3, which is where the paradiddle begins. So I mean, it's not truly like a partial. Like a partial is like where you would have you know, most of a paradiddle, and you're knocking off like one note at the beginning or one note at the end, or you could even, you know, poke out a kick or a snare, like omit a kick or snare in the middle of it. But it falls under the same guise, yeah? So, for example, I could go, if I demonstrate this slowly, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right, so it's on the 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. Yeah? So you can almost just call that the John Bonham, because there's probably at least 10 songs where he does that somewhere in the song, if not it being like the meat and potatoes of what he's playing for that groove. So again, I kind of refer to that as a change-up, but it's still a Groove-A-Diddle, because you're using the concept of the Groove-A-Diddle to create that beat, yeah, and to get a flow that way. So here's a little bit faster. Notice that I'm adding some dynamics in here, and it's one of the things that makes it like really groove and have a nice bottom to it and like a fat backbeat. So generally speaking, if you're playing a backbeat, if you have the 2 and the 4, the 2 and the 4 representing the backbeat, you always want to bring that out. You always want to play that as strong as you can, and then ghost or unaccent the other notes, yeah? So ghost notes, most people describe them as a note that is felt more than it is heard, and one of the reasons for that is because if you're playing with a band, obviously there's a lot of other sound happening at the same time, right? So you have like stacks of Marshall amps, right, and like Ampeg bass cabinets, right, and you have all the stage monitors and everything if you're on like a decent sized stage. So the ghost notes kind of get like, especially live, they kind of get lost in the mix. In a studio recording, you can bring them out more, because you can, you know, EQ and, you know, add the right amount of compression and everything to like kind of bring the ghost notes out. But what they really do is they add like a percussive effect, and they also create a transparent sound. What a transparent sound is where you have layers of dynamics in your playing. Things always sound more buttery and smooth, especially even just on raw drums, you know, like I'm playing right now. But when you add it to music, it's kind of magical what happens, because you almost don't really hear what's happening in the unaccented ghost notes so much, but you feel them. It adds like a thickness to the groove, if you will. And the other cool thing about ghost notes is you can choose to pull some of them out. Yeah. So I also like to describe playing dynamically and creating a transparent sound as, you know, building layers of different rhythms too. So it's almost like you're playing percussion and drum set at the same time when you're able to do this, and it's hard for sure. It takes a lot of technique. Maybe in another video I'll break down the molar stroke a little bit with a little bit more detail, but for right now, really what you want to do is just make sure that you're hitting the 2 and the 4 stronger. Yeah, you're accenting it, you're dropping the weight of your arm and your stick into the drum to really, you know, set off the compression inside the drum. And then the other notes, you're just trying to kind of tap the surface of the snare. This is the simplest way of thinking about it, and just set off the snares underneath. Yeah. So moreover, I guess one thing I could talk about, technique that will help you in this realm, is to keep the stick at an angle. Yeah. So whenever you're playing a ghost note, you want to be up on the thin part of the drumstick. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, obviously there's less surface area on the tip of the stick. Now you don't want to be that extended because that's bad form. But when you're flat like this, you're on the barrel part of the stick, and all, you know, the tip of different drumsticks are shaped differently, but it's the same concept, right? That the fat part of the stick gives you a fat sound, right? With the thin part, even if I try to play it harder, hear that? The difference between that and that, right? It's like night and day. So much of playing a ghost note or an unaccented note appropriately is to just be at this angle where your wrist is lifted. Your arm can be more or less flat. You don't want to be super extended because then you end up like in awkward, uncomfortable positions. You're not feeling or looking too good while you're playing, right? So you want to be relaxed, but you want the stick to be at an angle so you're on the thin part of the stick, and then play a little bit off center of the snare. Yeah, so like about here, you can hear how that like just beautifully sets off the snares. And then the molar stroke is pretty much where you're coming up, and then it's like a whip-like stroke where you're attacking the middle of the drum, right? Where you get the most compression. So least compression, most compression, right? So although you can play a paradiddle flat, right? So if I demonstrate the Groove-A-Diddle flat again. Once I add the dynamics, it really starts to come to life. Right? And then, of course, you can decide and even start to feel the waves when you're playing it, and bring out some of the unaccented notes and start accenting them. Yeah. So I don't really. I mean, you can always experiment with just like bringing one out of the mix. So for example, if I go 1 beat and that's a really hard one to do because you have what's called the reverse molar, which is where you have to double. You normally play like that, and you have to unaccent or ghost the first stroke, and accent the second one. So that's a much more advanced technique. But you know, just for example, it's really good to be able to, with definition in your playing, go from an unaccented note to an accented note, from 1/16th note to the next, right? Which is a very tight interval to do that. But the molar stroke and what's called the reverse molar, forwards is this, right? You can do 2 accents with it, or like this, right? But a lot of times when you're doing the forwards molar in like a funk groove, incorporating the paradiddle, you'll do it that way. Yeah, so for example, play slower. Yeah. And then I'll do the reverse again. Reverse molar is much harder because you have to start with the ghost stroke and then rock the weight down and slightly forward to be able to get into the center of the drum and get the velocity and get the flat end of the tip of the stick right in the middle. Yeah, so. So those are some things you can play around with, although they're more advanced. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the same type of concept with an inverted paradiddle. So this is a very cool thing to mess around with. Inverting any rhythm is an unbelievably powerful tool that you want in your bag as a drummer. Each inversion will take you a lot of time to digest it, both mentally and then physically with your chops. Yeah, so practicing this stuff on a pad, away from the drums, even drumming on your leg. Did a lot of that when I was younger. Very good thing to be able to build up this set of chops with. So when you're inverting or displacing a paradiddle, basically you're starting from a different point within the paradiddle. So if I break it down on the snare drum, and I'll also break it down between like a couple toms or like the hat and the snare, so you can really, you know, hear and see what's happening here. So regular paradiddle, right, you have 2 alternating strokes followed by a double, and then same thing on the left hand, like it. So that's what I refer to as first position, and there's 4 positions. The simplest way of thinking about this is that whatever the number of strokes are that exist within a pattern, that's how many inversions there are. So paradiddle, even though it switches from the right hand lead to left hand lead, and I guess in some ways you could consider that like 8 different strokes, you kind of want to narrow it down to what happens before it flips. It's the easier way of thinking about it. So there's 4 different positions or 4 different inversions, right? So you have like the root, the first, you know, position, as I like to call it. You have the second, the third, and then you have the fourth. I'll just break those down really quick, and then I'm not going to demonstrate the third and the fourth with Groove-A-Diddles, at least not in this video, but I'm going to concentrate on the second one. So, which is highly usable in rock and funk and fusion, just about everything, jazz. The second position, the easiest way of thinking about this, again, is that you're still starting with the lead hand, but the double has moved up from the and to the E, okay? So if I count if I go from the first position, 1, and 2, and right? So the double is initiated on the and when we're playing around with the second position, again, the easiest way to approach this is just to move the double up in time to the E. So you end up with 1, and up, and then the tricky thing is it switches hands there. So then we go left, right, right, left. So if I say the sticking, it'd be right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. Do a little quieter. Right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. Yeah, so that's the second position. If we moved it up another 16th note, then we would end up with the double beginning on the 1. Yeah, so the double is at the top now, and then the alternating strokes would be after it. So that would be like this: 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, and yeah, or right, right, left, right, left, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Position is the trickiest one because the double happens from the which is at the end of the phrase, back to the 1. So it's the kind of the trickiest one to wrap your head around. Because if you end up starting with 3 singles, which would be right, left, right, and then the double goes from the back to the 1. Yeah, so it's really, really kind of tricky one to get a handle on. Watch this: right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left. Faster. Yeah. So first position. Second position. Third position, double at the top. Right, right, final one, fourth loops around from the end back to the beginning. And that is a ton to chew on. If you've never tried any of these, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about as soon as you even try one inverted paradiddle. It's a mental and a physical challenge just to play with 2 sticks on a pad or a drum or your leg or a table. Work with what you got. So now we're going to apply the second position. We're going to put the third and fourth on the back burner for now, but we're going to take the second position and we're going to work through the same steps, and you'll kind of see that this is one of the best ways to go around this. Yeah, so we're going to go right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, yeah. So again, just taking this. Doubling the kick with the lead hand. Right, left, left, and again, I'm playing it pretty flat with no, relatively no dynamics on the left hand. Yeah. Here's faster. Here's with some dynamics bringing out the backbeat. Faster. Now, obviously, that one's pretty hard to do because the right hand is still in on the paradiddle. Yeah, so the kick and the hat are doubling all the way throughout. So even if you get it fast here and you get it fast there, they have to be together, otherwise it's not going to groove. Yeah. So there's definitely something to work on as you're working on speed. So the last thing I'm going to demonstrate is I'm going to take that same rhythm and I'm going to straighten out the hi-hat just like I did with the first one. So this is the method. This is the process that you want to go through with all 4 of the inversions of paradiddles, and then start to work on dynamics. Right? That's a lot of people wait till the very end to work on dynamics, and I understand that logic and that way of thinking, but it's much better to work on it as you go, because the technique and working on these principles is, it takes time to develop the dynamics, so you don't want to get these patterns happening, work on them for like 6 months and then go back and try to add the dynamics in. You kind of want to work on it as you go. So just a little piece of advice there. But if we straighten out the hi-hat, check out how cool this is. Faster. Faster still. Yeah, and then so the last step would be to try to phrase with it. Yeah, so you could do like, again, similar to the Bonham-ism would be to do just straight time, or you could pepper in some kicks or some snares as you choose, and then throw in the inverted paradiddle, the second position. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, faster. Yep, faster still. So, like what you saw here today, we're going to be doing a series of videos like this. I'll try to kind of add on to each video with some new concepts. There's also other paradiddles out there. So, you know, you have the paradiddle, which is a pattern in 6. You also have the double paradiddle, which is 2 sets of alternating strokes followed by one set of diddles. Yeah. Hence the old school term for that was paradiddle, and that's also a pattern of 6. So there's a lot of cool like African grooves and like world music based concepts that directly are derived from the double paradiddle, and it's just really fantastic stuff, because as you can see, you can use it to play a groove over and over again. You can play a straight groove, a simple groove, dip in and out of it, as I was kind of just demonstrating. We play it off different parts of the kit, and then in some subsequent videos we'll talk about how the left hand can start to wander around the toms and the hi-hat, staying within the pattern. So it's just the most, you know, like unbelievably adaptable lick for not only creating grooves, but you know, just opening up the possibilities of the drum set. So I'm currently accepting online students, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact Jeremy at Modern Music Studio. Thank you.